Completely normal. A Dvar Torah for Parashat Shemot. There's an almost built-in contradiction in the relationship between the Israeli nation and other nations. On the one hand, the Torah says that our role is to be the international role of kingdom of priests and a holy nation, as opposed to sometime the distant, thou shalt not marry them. Wasn't Esav Yaakov's brother, and I hated Esav? This dissonance determines our attitude towards the world's nations and even the qualities of thought that we attribute them. It also accompanies us throughout history, in the words of the sages, historians, archaeologists, and of course, the Tanakh interpreters. Ramban explanation, the commentator whose words we're going to focus on this week, is famous mainly among rabbis and scholars who compare the steps taken by Pharaoh to those taken by the Nazi regime during the Holocaust. I, however, chose to look at them from a slightly different angle. I'd like to begin by outlining our investigation. During our Parashah, we meet representatives of the Egyptian nation. The first encounter begins with a new king over Egypt who did not know Yosef, and Rashi is quick to teach us that he acted as if he did not know, or in other words, he was ungrateful. Ramban, on the other hand, interprets it a bit differently. In Pasuk Yud, he says, Pharaoh and his wise counselors did not see fit to slay them by the sword, for it would have been a gross treachery to smite without reason a people that had come into the land by command of a former king. The people of the country also would not give the king consent to commit such perfidy, since he took counsel with them. Ramban offers more practical reasons for the need to work slyly, but the first two reasons were kings, and I'd like to add in brackets, civilized kings, do not behave in such a treacherous manner, and the people, whose opinion carries weight with the government, will not agree to such treacherous behavior. Ramban doesn't stop here. He then explains that Pharaoh did not want to charge his executioners to slay them by the decree of the king or to cast them into the river. Rather, he said to the people that whoever would find a Jewish child should throw him into the river, meaning his people. Should the child's father complain to the king or the master of the city, they would tell him to bring witnesses, and then they will exact vengeance for the crime. This is not the law, says Pharaoh, but a criminal minority. Pharaoh needs to leave a semblance of a legal system and justice, even when he commits crimes that today would be defined as crimes against humanity, and even when things seem to get out of hand. Rambam emphasizes, it appears that the decree was revoked. Perhaps it was through Pharaoh's daughter, who in her compassion for the child Moshe said to her father that he should not act in that way. It may be that when it became known that this decree was enacted by the king, he revoked it. In other words, Pharaoh listens to his compassionate daughter, or there are limits to what the people are willing to do. Ramban then teaches us that each step towards increasing the Israelite slavery was out of fear that they would be killed when the slaves chose to leave. This fear became stronger every time the birth rate increased instead of decreasing. He adds that all this time the king supported them with sparing bread, as is customary for those who work in his service, because fish are very abundant in Egypt, and by command of the king the Israelites would obtain them from those who caught them. They would also take cucumbers and melons from the vegetable garden, no one putting them to shame, for such was the king's command. In other words, Pharaoh took care of their basic needs, just like any tyrannical ruler would. Ramban learns a few more positive qualities that belong to the king of Egypt from the end of the Parashah as well. When Moshe and Aaron stand before Pharaoh, he addresses them by their names. Why do you, Moshe and Aaron, interrupt the nation from its tasks, says the Torah? And Ramban explains, he asks them for their names and mentions them by name in a respectful manner. Pharaoh gives them this basic courtesy even before he recognizes their wisdom, when, according to Ramban, he changes from being courteous to honoring them. It follows then that without underestimating the evil of the actions of the Egyptian nation and its leader, Ramban attributes to them many positive qualities. They have a conscience that needs to be quiet. They operate within a democracy. There's a legal system. They have compassion. They are driven by a certain logic. They care for their slaves' basic needs. They are polite. They appreciate wisdom, and they're normative. One test case isn't going to be enough to draw large-scale conclusions, but at least from here it seems that Ramban is kinder to the Egyptians than Rashi. But to be honest, I'm not sure which interpretive approach scares me more. Rashi's, who accuses them from the get-go of being ungrateful, who in the story of the Egyptian man who beat the Hebrew man also accuses the Egyptian of stealing the beaten Israelite's wife, who in the story of the death of the Egyptian king claims that he became a leper and slaughtered Israeli babies to bathe in their blood. It's really no wonder that such a cruel massacre comes from such cruel decrees. Or Ramban's approach that shows how a normal and moral nation, under the right or wrong conditions, decides that genocide doesn't really go against its values. Since I have no conclusions, I can't make any declarations, but what I can say is that I enjoyed making this video, and if you joined it as well, you're more than welcome to subscribe or pass it on to a friend, or maybe buy my book. There's a link in the comments below. I am Dovi Holtz, one who loves Tanakh.